Hello, welcome to the next day of this Bible study. I've lost track of what day we're on, but we're here. One of the reasons why we wanted to do this connected to the How to Be Happy series is because there are so many amazing verses in the book of Philippians, and we know that in 3 Sunday messages, there's just no way that we're going to be able to dig into them all, but it's a short book, but a very punchy book. Like, it's full of amazing truths. And the verse or verses that I wanted to stop on today is Philippians 2, verses 12 and 13. It says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but also much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." Let's pause there for a second, because there's a lot in that. I love the reminder that we don't need to only take on the teaching that we've received when the teacher is in the room, or when the leader that we're following is present, or when the person that we want to please is around. We fulfill the call on our lives every day, all the time, in the seen places and the unseen places. And I love Paul's reminder here that says, "I've equipped you with truth. Please don't just do it when I'm there. Do it all the time, in my absence even. Obey the work that I'm teaching you to do." And then it says, "Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." Obviously, this is not fear like somebody being terrorized or somebody being oppressed. This is fear like reverence and awe. And the instruction to work out your salvation means don't just take it to heart. Don't just internalize the truths of salvation. Go and live them out. Go and show people the fruit of salvation in your life, the fact that you're changed, the fact that you have hope, the fact that you understand and even can administer a testimony of grace. Like, go and work that out in your life. Don't let it be a theory, let it be an action. And then he goes on to say, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure." I don't know what your translation gives that as, because that's kind of a confusing language, but I looked it up in a few other translations, that verse. And the NLT says it like this: "It is God who is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him." And I was just struck by the fact that this is a book of joy. We hear a lot about Paul's joy. We hear a lot about his advice to the Philippian church of how they can cultivate joy. But here in this moment, we get a glimpse of God's joy. And we get to see some of what it is that pleases God our Father. Yes, Paul is a bringer of wisdom and Holy Spirit inspired words of truth. But ultimately, it's not his direction that we need to strive to follow. It's God's heart that we need to grab hold of in our own lives and really strive to bring joy to, or to bring delight to. That's what we really need to be focused on, is like, does it delight God? Is God pleased with the way that we live? And I love the way that verse phrases it in that translation, saying, "It is God who is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him." God gives us the desire to please him. God gives us the power to do what pleases him. And we only have to be obedient to those things. Do we want to please the Lord? In this book of joy, let's, of course, understand how we can receive joy. Let's, of course, learn from Paul's example of the joy that he's experiencing even in challenging circumstances. But ultimately, let's keep our eyes focused on the main thing, which is what brings delight to the Lord. What is it that he delights in? And we know that there are other things that he delights in. It's not exclusively this part of the Bible that tells us about God's joy. There are other elements that tell us that God delights in justice. He delights in our prayers, to hear our prayers. He delights in our hope, in our obedience. He delights in his Son. We know that ultimately he delights in our faith. And actually Hebrews 11 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. So we please him by believing his promises, believing what he's told us. But I just think it's a really interesting little moment here that we bring pleasure and we please God when we obey him. And he gives us the desire to obey him, and he gives us the power to obey him. So I guess my thought for today is, what are we doing that is obedient to God? How are we bringing delight to God? How are we living in such a way that God would be delighted by our actions? And I think it's a really great question to ask through the day today. What would bring delight to my Father in heaven? What is it that I could do in this situation? What decision could I make that would please him? He goes on to give some practicals about not grumbling, about being innocent, about shining bright like stars in the sky, but ultimately all of those instructions are given because we should want to delight our God. So as we read this joy book and continue to reflect on it, I love this moment to pause and think, not just what brings me joy or what will I feel better as a result of, but what brings God joy. I love that Paul leads us to that consideration. So I'd love you to think about that today, and we'll come back tomorrow.